Good morning. Welcome to this celebration and appreciation of the life of Clive Carrel, someone to whom we were all close at different places and times, whose humor and intelligence touched us all, who had family far away, and so we are effectively his family here in his adopted home. We remember him fondly, and while this is by way of being a sad event, it is also a celebratory event, I think more than most, because Clive truly lived and touched the people who knew him, and we can all feel joyous in the fact that we knew him and that we take him, we continue to live with him, as they like to say in these affairs. He who has memories and friends is never really dead. He's still with us, he's still alive, and will always be, as long as we remember him. Just a bit of bookkeeping. We have this microphone if anybody wants to speak later, or we also have a portable microphone if you don't feel inspired to want to walk up to the front of the church. I'm happy to bring you the microphone. When we have that time, I'll sort of keep an eye open and just let me know if you want the microphone.
Thank you, John, and hello, everybody. First, I want to apologize for my voice. I'm hoping it'll last. And I want to read to you a poem that struck me as being evocative of Clive. And it's Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in the yellow wood, and I, sorry that I could not travel both, and be one traveler, long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves, no step had trodden black. Oh, I marked the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And now I want to try to give you a few of my thoughts and memories about Clive, and also share a few of some other people's thoughts. And I'm hoping that some of you will also have things to share. And this is a case where I wish I had a teleprompter like President Obama that would make it seem that I wasn't reading, but I am going to have to read, so bear with me. Good day, mates, which is something that Clive would never, ever say. When I think of Clive, I think of the barn at Marshfield, out there where the marsh meets the land. Most of you know the barn, where we all got together every summer. And I remember Clive's tattered list that he kept from year to year of all the stuff he needed to bring to the barn, including a portable piano keyboard. And I think of him, and I think everyone will remember him disappearing to practice the piano every afternoon, and always using the headphones to listen to himself, and never letting us hear him. Every afternoon we'd find him also on the deck of the barn reading, stooped over with a huge magnifying glass. And Catherine reminded me that he would start hovering around 10 in the morning, waiting for someone to go to the beach with him. Of course, no one else was up and about at that point. He didn't want to go alone because he needed a landmark of other people to know where to come in to land from the ocean without his glasses. And I think of him sitting on the beach at Hummerock. He would be completely covered, hat, long-sleeved shirt, shorts, and then his red and white striped beach towel over his legs. And I think of him stopping for ice cream at the Sands End Cafe And I think of him standing at the kitchen sink, kind of reluctantly washing dishes. I think of him staying up to talk after dinner and hanging on to the early morning end. Well, to go back a bit, he and I met about 1989 at the Volpe Center, where we both worked as writers and editors. And it was soon clear to me that Clive was not your average Joe. It did not take much for him to launch into a discussion of Michelangelo or Flaubert or any number of literary or artistic people. And over time, as I got to know him, I got to know his passions. He had a passion for movies, or flicks as he called them. And I don't know if you all knew, he had a long-standing, not-so-secret crush on Nicole Kidman. He had a passion for art and art books. He owned hundreds of art books collected over the years, and every one of them was individually wrapped in plastic. And they filled several bookcases, and there were some even underneath his bed. And he had a passion for dancing. For years he would go to ballroom dancing classes, and Alice Taylor tells me that she found dancing diagrams amongst his papers. And he also, of course, had a passion for music. And he had a wildly expensive stereo system and speakers when, as we know, for the most part, he lived very frugally. And of course, his passion for playing the piano and for acting and improv. I remember once that he told me he got a part in a sketch, only to find out that he was to play a corpse. And of course, he had a passion for reading. I don't remember the exact routine, but for years he would assign himself to read at least an hour of Latin and an hour of Greek every day before allowing himself to read an English novel, for example. And this last year, most of you know that the day after Thanksgiving, he had a car accident, and after stints in the hospital and rehab, he moved into assisted living. And for the time he was there, he was reasonably content. But thinking back, I think he was slowly leaving us from that point on. That was November, almost a year ago. And while he was there, I saw him regularly, and although he was often vague about day-to-day stuff, I would always find a glimmer of what I think of as the real Clive. His irony, his acerbic wit, but also his understanding of the human condition. We still laughed together, and he listened intently when I talked to him. It was sad to see him change and have difficulty moving when he used to stride ahead at such a remarkably fast pace. Once when we were in one of these endless emergency room waits, I asked him if he wanted me to read to him. And he didn't answer right away, but then a few minutes later he said, "Read." And I read to him from Nabokov's Speak Memory, and we were both transported to the Russian countryside outside St. Petersburg, where Nabokov was discovering his lifelong passion for butterflies. And no remembering of Clive would be complete without talking about his idiosyncrasies. His cold apartment. I would call him and have to wait for more than 10 rings while he unwrapped himself from the blankets and electric blankets and made his way through the obstacle course of wires and other stumbling blocks to the only phone in the far-off kitchen. And of course, he didn't have an answering machine. He was a creature of routine. I think that's an understatement. He couldn't really understand people who did not have a routine, in the same way that people like me couldn't really understand how people could have such a rigid routine. Bethan reminded me how we used to quiz him about his meals and how every breakfast and lunch was pretty much the same, and his dinners also followed a fairly ritualistic sameness. He would buy 35 pieces of fruit a week, and that's exactly 5 a day. I could keep on going to keep searching for real memories of Clive's to share with you. But I do want to share with you some memories that other people sent me. Jon Taylor's going to relay some things that his longtime friends in Australia sent, but I thought I'd share a couple of things that his ex-sister-in-law, Susan, sent me. She says, Clive was always thin, no matter what he ate or what physical activity he engaged in, which was mostly reading. He remained trim. This was a major cause of envy. He could visit 4 museums in one day and not break a sweat. And he liked to conserve energy, as we know. He kept the thermostat very low. One time when we were staying there, we woke up in the morning to find ice in our bedside water glasses. And he was a wealth of information. My father, she says, was amazed that Clive knew what routes were taken to the Punic Wars. I don't even know where the Punic Wars took place. So, and then this last one is from his friend Louis Kushinsky, whom I have never heard him talk of. But I think it really sums up a lot about Clive. He says, "Clive is no more. My memory conjures the bloodhound-like seriousness of his face, an image soon displaced by the impish Clive of tooth music and the incredulously amused Clive as I spun him my improbable hypotheses. The crassness surrounding him hurt and offended Clive, for he was a man of subtle sensibilities and sharp intellect. He sought solace, refuge, and understanding in the works of superior beings. He contemplated each phrase of great music and painstakingly looked at great paintings in an effort to be more close to the souls of their makers. For me, Clive was a dear and close friend. Over time, our friendship evolved into something like a sibling-type relationship with closeness and confidence, but also a fair sprinkling of irritation here and there. He had a unique place in our lives, family but not family. He was included in all our major holidays. I got an email yesterday from his nephew Tim in Australia, who remembered spending Christmas with his uncle and our family in 1990. Clive would always show up 5 minutes early with a bottle of Australian wine. So I just want to say on behalf of all of us here and his friends and family overseas, thank you, Clive, for enriching our lives so much. And so long, mate. No worries.
I feel very odd having a hat on in church. It's not the usual tradition, but in honor of Clive, why not? I have a couple of small extracts from his old friends John Ward and Gerald Fitzgerald, who sent these to Sean, and we thought we'd read a couple of them. They're very touching and very well established in Clive's ancient past, most of which none of us here experienced, but gives a feel for him when he was younger. Clive was this is from John Ward, who was a friend from his university days in Melbourne. Clive was a great and loyal friend, a tremendous conversationalist, an extremely talented but humble and self-effacing individual. We remember his lively sense of humor and great laugh, and his commitment to the classics, and his generally well-filled mind. We were also rather stunned by his enormous knowledge of horses and the Melbourne Cup. I think he knew who won that race back to the beginning of it. He ran Saturday evening sessions listening to music at his place in Hampton, where he would take the records out of their original paper bags and play them. One had to listen in silence and listen to the whole LP, both sides, or set of records. No part listenings were permitted. At the end, discussion of the pieces followed. We would whistle whole Brahms symphonies. Not me, I was too ignorant and mostly just listened. But Clive had a photographic memory for this music and would introduce a forgotten or omitted counterpoint or thread of melody with special ways of indicating pizzicato and other orchestral sound effects. He was indefatigable in everything. He had a personal reading program each week, which took in ancient Greek and Latin, German, Old Italian, French, and various readings in English genres. He would pursue this program by night and day, and all through the bitter Boston winters, and they were bitter for him as he never used central heating, claimed it cost too much. So he would rug up at night with an overcoat and a scarf and plastic gloves on his hands to stop frostbite and ulcers, and keep at it. He was a very special person, quite unlike anyone else I have ever met. He was devoted to the cultural legacy of Western man, and this kept him from feeling lonely and filled his mind and activities. And from another friend from his Melbourne days, Gerald Fitzgerald. I always think the event that forged our relationship goes back to that Classics Conference of 1960. After I had spent a day amidst the music group and displayed my credentials, which at the time extended mainly to Mozart and Stravinsky, the whole conference adjourned for a walk along the adjoining beach. Clive came and joined me. Presumably he had been impressed that I was interested in a range of issues beyond the second aorist. Even more so, presumably, he had noted that I knew some Stravinsky, and so, and this I vividly recall and endlessly over the years recalled to him, he asked me what I thought about Schoenberg, which absolutely floored me. Schoenberg at that stage was barely known, in Australia at least, and whilst I may have heard of him, I certainly hadn't heard any of his music. But the charm of this question was that it was, as I almost certainly then realized, a seriously intended question. His collection of books on painting, even then, as I recall, was extraordinary. More extraordinary was the way he would gaze at these books, which is to say at the reproductions in them, the concentration and time of his gaze, and then the detail of his remarks and observations. Painting was surely the great passion among the manifold intellectual and artistic activities to which he directed so much of his time on earth. None of us could rival him for the care and concentration he gave to these activities. Amidst all of this was his style, his jovial, ironic, usually self-deprecating style, the laughter, usually a bit explosive, his zeal for company, his strategies to attain such as dancing. And I wanted to make a few remarks of my own. I've known Clive for more than 30 years, actually. We met as he had started his post-academic career as a computer software engineer, which may strike some of you as a little odd because that was not exactly his main interest in life, but he gave it a good shot and worked hard at it, showed a good rational sense of logic, which was necessary in that work. But he always brought more. When you sat and talked to him, of course, we didn't talk computer jargon or other boring technical details. We talked art, movies, which I learned very quickly was his great passion. I was not as familiar with his art books, but he clearly showed a knowledge of art and music too. We talked music quite a lot. I remember being quite struck, I was young at the time, and I was quite struck with the fact that he would commute by T all the way from Quincy to Waltham, and he would bring books in Greek and read his Greek on the T. And I remember thinking he must have been the only person in Boston who would read Greek while commuting on the T. And as I say, I was completely impressed with this. He always had a sense of humor. At one point, I was running a small group of people. Clive was one of the people who worked with me. And we had some project, I can't remember the details at this point, and unfortunately I could not find this email, which is from more than 30 years ago, but Clive, we were having some struggles getting a project done on deadline, and Clive sent a quite amusing little snippet of blank verse that he had made up in our honor and set us forth as journeyers on the vast ocean, probably some wonderful classical reference which was way over my head, but I remember at the time being struck with his humor and thoughtfulness because I was, as the leader, I was feeling quite pressured, and he was trying, I think, to lighten my burden. Over the years, Clive was always friendly and warm. His deep humanity was always very apparent, and as well as his intellect. He was not a dry intellect who wanted to show off his knowledge. He always saw it in the context of being friends with individuals, with the entire world, I always felt. He always had that open sense of caring about the world around him. I remember being struck when he took up, not exactly vegetarianism, when he stopped eating meat. We talked about it, and he explained to me how he felt about this, and he clearly had been a process for him of thinking about humanitarian considerations in what he ate, and I remember thinking it was quite unusual for a man at his age to make such a kind of a momentous decision, but one that clearly was deeply heartfelt, and I always had a lot of respect for. And then, of course, as Sean mentioned, the last years there was a certain amount of decline, although Clive always had a little bit of his old spark there. Even at the end, during one of these endless visits, I think it was not an emergency room, was actually, he was in the hospital, one of the several times he had to be admitted, and I had brought a letter from, I think it was John Ward, which I read to him, and Clive seemed to be understanding it, although it was a little hard to tell. He was a little vague in his speech. But then suddenly he popped up with some snippet in Latin, some humorous thing that he remembered saying to Ward back in 1961 or something. And of course it went over my head, not being a Latinist, but it was nonetheless remarkable that a man who seemed otherwise to be somewhat out of it could suddenly conjure up this humorous couplet in a foreign tongue. He was a remarkable man overall. And we were sorry to lose him so seemingly so quickly, but as I said before, when someone has touched you to this extent, he never really leaves. And he'll be with me, and I'm sure all of us, always. I did want to read one little pro forma piece here. It's actually a classic from Ralph Waldo Emerson, very appropriate for a Unitarian church, about life, and I think it's very apt for Clive. It was titled Success. To laugh often and love much, to win the respect of intelligent persons and the affection of children, to earn the approbation, excuse me, the approbation of honest critics, and to endure the betrayal of false friends. To appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to give of oneself, to leave the world a little better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to have played and laughed with enthusiasm and sung with exultation, to know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded. I think we can all say that Clive was eminently a success. So I do have this microphone. If anybody would like to speak, I'm happy to, I'm sure it's turned on here. Happy to deliver this, or you're welcome to go speak in front of the, is anyone who has a? Do you want to go up front?
Okay. Hi.
Don't hold it too close to here. You just kind of hold it up like this.
Yes. I haven't seen Clive in the last years of his life. Yeah, I'm Beatrice, and I hadn't seen Clive in the last years of his life, but about 10 years ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago, a common friend, Michael Coran, said, I wanted to have a cinema companion. And he said, I'm sending you a cinema companion. So he found Clive, actually. They were walking in the street, and he said, Clive, I want you to be a companion of Beatrice. This was me, a cinema companion. And then he said, oh, I know Beatrice from before. I would love to be her cinema companion. And that's how he began. So we went for several years, maybe 2-3 years. Every Friday we went to the cinemas. And Clive was a structured man in one sense. For example, for him, if we have to go to a place, it was hard to think that we were going to find a parking space. And for me, I always know I find a parking space. But he was always thoughtful and insightful. He was a really loyal friend. And we have really beautiful and insightful conversations after every movie we saw Friday nights. And what Michael Coran told me to tell about him, he took some humor classes, and that's beautiful to have a little child here. So he took some humorous classes with him, and he said he had an incredible sense of humor. With me, we had a more serious relationship. We went to the movies, we talked about the movies in a serious way. But I think the main thing I can say about Clive, that he was a loyal friend and he was truly a very good man. And I thought I'm a poet, in addition to other things I do, so I thought I'm going to read a poem because I believe in the oneness of us all. So I'm going to read this poem, and I think Clive would like it. Maybe. I deeply believe that we are one, and I think now Clive is not on this earth, but I feel actually that he's seated on a cloud talking to my mother, who died 1 year ago. She loved classical music too, and maybe he's beside all those composers that he loved. Oneness, sun bathing this tropical paradise. I wrote this poem when I was in St. John, and it was a very beautiful, with lots of, the water were blues and green, the skies were beautiful. Oneness, sun bathing this tropical paradise. Palms standing by the pool's side. The doors, colonnades protecting us from the entrance of unwanted evils. Thunders now wake. The lions roaming, announcer of the blowing up of the cave of sorrows. Letting go, letting go. Mandolin call, opening of vibrant notes, where the only presence is the now. Soft rain that wets and erases your future past, caressing only your now. I become iris, an indigo, green, red, and white rainbow. I see through a child's eyes, an angel knocking at your laughter. I am the core of the trees, the dark solid wood that sustains me through the years by the passage of shadows and light. I am the bird's beaks, humming the feeding leaves. I am a pelican flying fast over the waters, landing to eat separate fish, withering into one. I am the whole world. And thank you, Clive, for having formed part of my life and the life of all of us. Thank you. I don't know if someone wants to say something.
I'm Alice. I'm John's wife, Julia's mother. The road less traveled reminded me of roads that Clive traveled often and on foot, which I think was the secret to his lifelong ability to stay trim and fit. And oftentimes the road led to our house on a Saturday or Sunday morning or afternoon. He'd just pop in for tea or coffee. When we lived in West Newton, we were actually closer to his apartment than we were now that we live in Waltham, but he visited us in both places, and always having a pleasant chat, a nice yak, talking about all sorts of things. One day he showed up with a plate of deviled eggs and said, do your children like deviled eggs? I seem to have these extras. I thought there was a party, but I must have the day wrong or something. So he had made deviled eggs and needed somewhere to park them. So he brought those over. More recently, we knew that he had a large apartment which he lived in for 20 years, filled with books and records, and he enjoyed watching films on the DVD player. And then we discovered various film series at a screening room at the Paramount Theater at Emerson College, and old films, which we thought, you know, maybe Clive would enjoy this, let's make an evening of it. And we saw film noir, we saw all kinds of other classics, Singing in the Rain, in a place that was really good to see flicks. And we often combined this with a trip to Chinatown for a vegetarian meal, of course. And walking all over downtown in Chinatown, Clive always keeping up, always wearing that familiar hat and coat. And, you know, just when you think, okay, what are we going to talk about next, he would come up with some zinger about the film that we had just seen, you know, some very witty comment, and just really a fitting punctuation to the evening. And those are the times that I'm going to remember the most and with the greatest fondness.
Anyone else? Roman. Stay there.
We're here to celebrate the life and times of Clive. We're here to celebrate the life and times of Clive. We're here to celebrate the life and times of Clive.
Pull back a little bit farther. That's perfect. Oh, 1 foot. Not anything like
that. There's a whole variety of points of contact, and many of which converge, well, all of which converge around Shan. And my relationship to Clive was formed, shaped by my stay in Australia. I was at the University of Melbourne, and so when we all sat on the deck of the barn in Marshfield, we had ample material to talk about. And I would explore his neighborhood and the different parts of Melbourne that I had a relationship to and was able to find out more about. On the deck at Marshfield, next to the marsh, which was one of his favorite spots, and that's where we came together every year for many years. And while Eva and kids played in the marsh, swimming in the marsh, or canoeing in the marsh with Philip, the son, and Catherine, and Anne, we would discuss matters pertaining to Melbourne. And he lived in a wonderful neighborhood that I had explored when I was at the University of Melbourne, south of the central part of Melbourne, and which was located on Prince Philip's Bay. It's called called St. Kilda, and it had a very large park, a very large lake, and a very extensive waterfront, a little bit like Brighton in England. But we did not know one another at that time. And it was only much later that I got to know him. And the point of contact there was the Transportation Systems Center in Cambridge. But we could have gotten together much earlier, namely in Columbus. Yeah, I lived in Columbus, Philip lived in Columbus, Caroline, but also Sean and her daughters lived in Columbus. Sean didn't know Clive in Columbus, neither did I. But we had other contacts, and so the barn and Marshfield, the Hammerock Beach, and the walk down to the beach from the barn, which we did every day when we were down there, after having spent hours on the deck discussing films and his various interests. And we imagined the different parts of Melbourne that I was familiar with and he could give detailed descriptions of. So, and then through Beatrice was another point of contact. And so it's great to celebrate the life and times of Clive. He had a most interesting life, and we can learn from his life. It's a life pattern that we could pattern our own lives after. He was moved from one topic to from one area to another area and became an expert and a contributor in all of those areas. Well, so I'm glad to be able to be say a few words.
So when I think of Clive, I think of what he gave us, and I think in particular of some Clive. It's silly. It's a funny story. It's funny. He gave me 3 times. He gave me Portrait of a Lady for Christmas, and I never read it. I still haven't read it, and I'm not sure why. It was so important for him to give it to me, to share that with me, but I think we can't always know what it is that, that we receive from our friends, always in the moment. So I'm very grateful to him for the gifts, I don't know, that he shared. And maybe we'll talk about that more at lunch, but yeah, I thought I would share something. He gave me, not this, but he gave me a different red scarf for Christmas. And so this scarf is now got another layer of memory and meaning to me. So I feel very lucky to have known him.
This is Peter.
If I may. My name is Peter Nagy. I met Clive about the same time that John did, at the same place, essentially. We worked at that illustrious company. So in a sense, we were colleagues, but our backgrounds were very different. I'd like to share, I have not prepared any remarks as such, but perhaps seeing that his friends remember him with so much warmth and so intimately, I might want to share a couple of moments with you. This was at Boston Systems, where we had many conversations, mostly about politics and aesthetics. And we never agreed on politics, he being a staunch Australian socialist, and my background being a Central European libertarian conservative. So we disagreed civilly, and I always looked up to him in a sense because of his background in the classics, which was one of the hobbies of my father, and unfortunately I had never had the opportunity to acquire as broad a background as he had. But in any case, at one time I wanted to look up the Widow of Ephesus, which I had seen way back in an undergraduate reader as a model of a successful short story, actually of an English or an American style short story, even though of course it's a classical piece of literature. So anyhow, I asked Clive if he knew where I could find. I had looked in various library catalogs and I couldn't find any reference. And I asked Clive and he said, Petronius, it's probably part of the Satyricon. And I asked him if he could get it for me. And in fact, a few days later, he brought in a volume of the Satyricon, which had seen better days, actually. And indeed, I was not familiar with the work, but I did find the Widow of Ephesus included in it. And I enjoyed it and set it aside, and then kind of forgot about it for about 6, 7, 8 months. And at that point, at some point, of course, I remembered it, and then I promised him that I would return it shortly, but I just couldn't find it at that particular time, and I searched whatever. Eventually, I did find the book and returned it to him within a reasonable time, and I felt somewhat guilty about this, and apologetically, I remarked to him that, I may be late in returning books, but I always do return books. And in a mildly chastising fashion, he kind of murmured, "It's a very good habit to cultivate." So that is one of my memories of Clive. Another one was, again, having to do with his classic background. I had gone to Latin school and was somewhat tortured by what seemed to me to be a very strange convention of Latin pronunciation, wherein the C's are always pronounced as a K, and that contrasted with my tradition, which is Central European and which follows what I thought was incontrovertible evidence that the K convention must be wrong, namely that practically all of the derivative Romance languages make a distinction in the pronunciation of the C on the basis of what kind of vowel it is followed by. Namely, if it's a back vowel, it is a K. If it's a front vowel, it is a C or some version of that. And he kind of thought about it a bit, and then about 2-3 weeks later, he brought in an essay, and he showed me excerpts wherein it was explained that indeed the likely pronunciation, even though we have no direct evidence, but it is very likely that the true pronunciation, the true practice of the Romans for the pronunciation of the C was probably as the Greek K, as it was evidenced by the fact that in Greek texts, the name of Cicero was always spelled as Stikeron, with capitals in the critical positions. And of course, I just couldn't oppose any argument to this. So I thanked Clive, and I was grateful to him. But it seems that I still prefer the old Central European convention in Latin pronunciation. In any case, Clive enriched my life just as he enriched yours, and for that I'm grateful. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to have been able to share these moments with you. Thank you.
I think if we have more to share, we'll do it over lunch or over beers. I think that what we have next is Ashley is going to play a Debussy piece for us. Well, Clive would like us to be happy today, I think. So I'm hoping we can, and I'm hoping that we can continue to celebrate. And I found a poem that I thought was good for today. Play jolly music at my funeral. I've taken in recent years to thinking about my funeral and have decided to make one paramount request. Play jolly music at that ritual. What good does it do to heap on dirges or other mournful melodies? I won't be there to be gratified by the grieving, and if I could tune in, I'd be happier to see those present have some relief. Dixieland would be nice. Joplin would be fine. Something by Fats Waller would certainly do. Those early jazzmen knew what they were up to when they set about making funeral marches swing. So swing me away, please, with a rousing tune. And now we have the great fun of having John play some Scott Joplin for us while we look at pictures of Clive's life, those that I have, those that we've been able to gather.
So for the most part, I only knew Clive at the at the barn in Marshfield, and every day he would always go to the ocean. So this is a poem by Mary Oliver. I am in love with ocean, lifting her thousands of white hats, in the chop of the storm or lying smooth and blue, the loveliest bed in the world. In the personal life, there is always grief, more than enough, a heartload for each of us on the dusty road. I suppose there is a reason for this, so I will be patient, acquiescent, but I will live nowhere except here, by ocean, trusting equally in all her blast and welcome of her sorrowless salt self.
Oh yes, it's me again. We're just going to have one more piece of music, and then we're all going to, hopefully everybody can come to have lunch with us. The directions are in your program, Kebab and Tandoor on Moody Street. And if someone isn't coming, if you could please let me know so I can give them a count. And there's parking behind the restaurant on Spruce Street, and it takes quarters, and I have plenty of quarters if people don't have change. Just let me know, just so that you don't have the logistic problem of not having the right money. It takes dollars. They do take dollars, but you know, if you happen to just have $20 bills in your wallet, let me know. And dole out the quarters. I just want to thank everybody for coming, and thank Ashley for giving us such a wonderful backdrop to our thoughts and memories.